Hey, I'm Ethan Harper, 35 years old, and just a few months ago, I thought my life was pretty solid. I'd have told you my marriage to Lauren was strong, something to be proud of even. We'd been together for 8 years, and I figured we'd crack the code to making it work, despite our differences. She came from old money, private schools, a family name that opened doors. Me? I grew up working class. My dad was a mechanic, my mom a nurse. We never had more than we needed. When we met, I was just a guy fixing computers, and she was this sharp, beautiful woman who didn't seem to care where I came from. I convinced myself we were equals, or at least I tried to. Looking back, though, the cracks were always there, waiting to split us apart. Her family, her mom, Catherine, and her brother Miles never liked me. Every time I was around them, it felt like I was auditioning for a part I'd never get. They'd smile, sure, but it was the kind that didn't reach their eyes. Lauren always brushed it off, saying, "They'll come around, Ethan. Just give them time." I wanted to believe her, I really did. But 8 years is a long time to wait for people to stop treating you like dirt under their polished shoes. Things had been tense for a while, little arguments here and there, but nothing I couldn't handle. That is, until the annual family reunion in upstate New York. It was supposed to be a weekend to bond, a chance to smooth things over. Lauren begged me to go, promising it'd be different this time, that her family would finally see me for who I was. Honestly, I wasn't thrilled. I'd rather have stayed home fixing a dozen busted laptops than face her relatives again, but I went for her. The estate was this massive colonial house perched on a cliff, all steep staircases and cold, echoing rooms. It was beautiful in a way that made you feel small, like you didn't belong unless you were born into it. From the moment we arrived, I felt the weight of their stairs. Catherine greeted me with a handshake so limp I barely felt it, and Miles smirked like he knew something I didn't. The whole weekend stretched out like a test I hadn't studied for, and I wasn't wrong. Every conversation was a minefield. I'd say something simple, like how nice the weather was, and Catherine would correct me, pointing out it was unseasonably warm for this time of year, like I'd insulted them by not knowing. Miles would chime in with some snide remark about my job, asking if I'd ever thought about moving up in the world. I'd laugh it off, trying to keep the peace, but inside, I was boiling. Lauren kept telling me to relax, that they didn't mean anything by it, but I could see it in her eyes. She knew they did. By day 2, I was counting the hours until we could leave. I kept my head down, stayed polite, but it was like trying to hold water in my hands. It kept slipping away. That night's dinner was the breaking point. We were all gathered around this long, polished table, candles flickering, silverware clinking, and I thought maybe I could get through it without a fight. Lauren squeezed my hand under the table like she was rooting for me, and for a second, I felt okay. But then Miles started in, louder this time, and Catherine joined him, picking apart everything from how I sat to the shirt I'd picked out. I could feel the room closing in, all those eyes on me, waiting for me to screw up. I don't know why I thought it'd be different. Maybe I was just tired of pretending it didn't hurt. Maybe I wanted to prove something, to them, to Lauren, to myself. Whatever it was, it set the stage for everything that came after. By the end of that weekend, I wasn't the same guy who'd walked through that door. That reunion wasn't just a family gathering. It was the start of a storm I didn't see coming, one that had been brewing for years. I'm Ethan Harper, and I've never been good at hiding how I feel, especially not that night at the reunion. The estate felt like something out of a movie, big, old, and cold, with a view of the cliff and endless staircases leading to rooms I wasn't allowed to see. Lauren dragged me there, promising this time her family would ease up on me. I didn't really believe her, but I went anyway, because I loved her, and because I kept hoping she'd be right one day. The place reeked of money and judgment. From the minute we pulled up, I knew I was in for it. Miles was waiting at the front door with that smirk of his, like he'd already won a game I didn't know we were playing. Catherine swept in, trailing perfume, and gave me a look like I'd tracked mud across her perfect floors, even though my shoes were clean. I tried to shake it off, told myself it was just a few days, but every step I took in that house felt like I was sinking deeper into a trap. Lauren whispered, "Just smile, Ethan. They'll warm up." But her voice sounded more desperate than sure. Dinner was the real test. We all sat at this huge table, the kind you see in pictures of royalty, with candles, crystal glasses, and more forks than I knew what to do with. I dressed up, put on a tie even though I hate them, because I wanted to fit in, or at least not give them an easy target. The food came out, stuff I couldn't pronounce, and I stayed quiet, nodding along while they talked about people and places I'd never heard of. Then Miles started in. "So, Ethan," he said, leaning back in his chair like he owned the world, "still tinkering with those computers? Must be nice to have such a simple life." His tone was all edges, and a few of Lauren's cousins snickered. I tried to laugh, said something about liking my job, but he wouldn't let up. Ever think about doing something more ambitious? He asked. I could feel Catherine's eyes on me, waiting for me to trip over my answer. I mumbled something about being happy where I was, and Lauren squeezed my knee under the table like that'd help. The room kept buzzing with their chatter, and I felt like a ghost, just there, not really part of it. Then I got this dumb idea to raise a toast. I don't know why. Maybe I thought it'd show them I wasn't an outsider, that I belonged at that table with my wife. I stood up, cleared my throat, and started talking about gratitude, about how lucky I felt to be part of their family. I kept it short, simple, no frills. But halfway through, one of her cousins started laughing. Not loud, just a quiet chuckle that spread like ripples. My face burned, and I stopped, looking around at all those faces. Some amused, some bored, none of them on my side. I raised my voice, not yelling, just firm, and said, "I'm serious." The laughter died, and the room went still. For a second, I thought maybe I'd gotten through, that they'd heard me, but then Catherine stood up, slow and deliberate, like she was about to pass judgment. "We don't tolerate outbursts at this table, Ethan," she said, her voice ice cold. Outbursts? Like I was a kid throwing a tantrum instead of a man trying to say something real. I looked at Lauren, waiting for her to say anything, to back me up. She didn't. She just stared at her wine glass, swirling it like it held all the answers. My chest tightened and I sat down. The silence crushed me. The rest of dinner dragged on, forks scraping plates, their voices picking up like nothing happened. But I was done. I could feel it in my gut. This wasn't just another bad night. It was the start of something breaking. Miles smirked across the table, sipping his drink. Lauren wouldn't meet my eyes. I'd tried to build a bridge with that stupid toast, and they'd burned it down before I could finish. I kept my mouth shut after that, nodded when I had to, but inside I was raging. Not loud, not wild, just the steady heat I couldn't shake. I'd spent years taking their jabs, swallowing my pride, telling myself it was worth it for her. But sitting there, watching her choose her wine over me, I started wondering how much longer I could take it. The night ended with polite goodbyes and fake smiles, and I followed Lauren up to our room, the weight of that moment still pressing down on me. I didn't know it yet, but that cold toast was the first crack in a wall I'd held up too long. I'm Ethan Harper, and after that dinner at the reunion, I couldn't keep it in anymore. Back in our room, a fancy setup with a 4-poster bed and curtains probably worth more than my truck, the door slammed shut behind us. We stood there for a second, staring at the floor, trying to find words for what I'd been holding in for years. My tie was choking me, so I yanked it off and tossed it on a chair. The night replayed in my head. Miles's smirk, Catherine's cold dismissal, Lauren sitting there like a statue while her family laughed at me. I turned to her. She was sitting on the edge of the bed, arms crossed, looking at me like I was the only one who'd done something wrong. "What was that, Ethan?" she asked, her voice small but sharp, like she was scolding a kid. I took a deep breath, trying to stay calm, and said, "I've had enough, Lauren. I'm done." She rolled her eyes, and that little move lit a fire in me. "You're too sensitive," she said, like it was a fact I should have known by now. "They were just joking. You didn't need to make a scene." I didn't yell, didn't throw anything, just raised my voice to finish a toast they'd turned into a punchline. I stepped closer, hands clenched at my sides, and said, "I'm your husband, not their punching bag. I've put up with their crap for years, and you never stand up for me." She didn't flinch, just crossed her arms tighter, her face calm and composed like she'd rehearsed this. "You don't get it," she said. "This is how they are. You just have to deal with it." Deal with it? 8 years of snide comments, fake smiles, and tests I couldn't pass. And she thought I should keep swallowing it? My voice stayed low, but it was shaking now. "I shouldn't have to deal with it. You should have had my back out there. Instead, you let them treat me like I'm nothing." She sighed, all dramatic, like I was exhausting her. "You're blowing this out of proportion," she said, and I could hear her mom's tone in it, that same arrogance. That's when I snapped. Not loud, not wild, just a quiet break inside me. "No, Lauren," I said. "I'm done pretending this is okay. I'm done with them kicking me while you watch." She narrowed her eyes and stood up, finally dropping her arms. "You've got 2 choices, Ethan," she said, her voice hard now. "Apologize or leave." The room froze, so quiet I could hear the wind rattling the old windows. Apologize for what? For trying to say something real? For wanting my wife to care? I stared at her, waiting for her to take it back, to soften, to show me she didn't mean it, but she just stood there, chin high, like she'd drawn a line and dared me to cross it. I'd spent years fighting for us, pleading my case to her family, proving I was good enough, begging her to see me as more than the guy they didn't want her to marry. And now she was giving me an ultimatum like I was the one who'd messed up. My heart ached, a deep, raw pain, but my head was clear for the first time in ages. I didn't yell back. I didn't beg her to change her mind. I just looked at her, really looked, and saw someone who'd chosen them over me again. "Fine," I said, my voice steady even though I felt like I was breaking. She blinked, like she hadn't expected that, but I didn't give her time to respond. I turned, grabbed my duffel from the closet, and started packing. Not everything, just what I needed: a few shirts, jeans, my toothbrush. She watched me, silent, and I could feel her eyes on my back, but she didn't say a word. No, wait, no, let's talk, nothing. I zipped the bag, slung it over my shoulder, and headed for the door. My hand was on the knob when she finally spoke. "Are you really doing this?" she asked, and her voice cracked a little, but it wasn't enough to stop me. I didn't turn around. "Yeah," I said, "I am." And then I stepped into the dark hallway. The house was quiet except for the faint hum of voices downstairs. I moved fast down those creaky stairs, past portraits of her ancestors staring at me like they knew I didn't belong. My truck was parked out front. I tossed my bag in the back, climbed in, and started the engine. The headlights cut through the night as I drove off the estate, the house shrinking in my rearview mirror. I didn't know where I was going yet, just that I wasn't stopping. My hands gripped the wheel, my heart pounding, but I didn't feel trapped anymore. I'd spent too long trying to fit into her world, bending over backwards to make it work. In that moment, I realized I didn't have to. She'd given me a choice: apologize or leave, and I'd picked the one she didn't think I would. The road stretched out ahead, empty and dark, and for the first time in years, I felt like I could breathe. I'm Ethan Harper, and I didn't look back after driving away from that big, cold house on the cliff. The truck's engine roared under my feet as I left the reunion, left Lauren, her family, and 8 years of trying to be someone I wasn't. My bag bounced in the back, my mind spinning, but I didn't feel lost. I just knew I couldn't go home. Not to the condo we'd shared, not to a life that felt like a cage with her name on it. I drove through the night, the roads dark and quiet, passing small towns with flickering lights. My phone was off. I didn't want to hear her voice, or Miles's, or Catherine's. I didn't want to see the messages I knew would come. After about 2 hours, I spotted a sign for a little regional airport, one of those places you'd miss if you weren't looking. It wasn't much, just a strip of runway and a low brick building, but something pulled me in. I parked, grabbed my bag, and walked inside. The place was half asleep, just a guy at the counter and a couple vending machines humming in the corner. I didn't have a plan, didn't even know where I wanted to go, but when I got to the counter, I asked, "What's the next flight out?" The guy barely looked up, tapped his computer, and said, "Oregon, 40 minutes, $200. Oregon. I'd never been there, never thought about it much, but it sounded far from New York, far from her family, far from the mess I'd just walked out of. "I'll take it," I said, pulling out my card. He shrugged, printed the ticket, and handed it over like it was nothing. To him, it wasn't. To me, it was everything. I sat on a hard plastic chair near the gate, my bag at my feet, watching the clock tick down. My heart was still racing, but it wasn't fear. It was something else, like relief mixed with a wild energy I hadn't felt in years. The plane was small, a puddle jumper with tight seats and one aisle, but I didn't care. I squeezed in by the window, buckled up, and stared out at the dark runway. When the engines roared and we started rolling, I felt the ground slip away, and with it, all the weight I'd been carrying. At 20,000 feet, it was just me and the hum of the plane. No voices telling me what to do, no eyes judging me for what I wasn't. I kept my phone off the whole flight, didn't even check it when we landed. I didn't want to know if Lauren had called, didn't want to hear her ask why I left or tell me to come back. The airport in Oregon was bigger but still quiet, the kind of place where people move slow and don't ask questions. I rented a car with cash, an old beater that smelled like stale coffee, and drove toward the coast. No map, just a vague idea to head west until I hit water. The sky was lightening when I got there, gray and soft with the promise of morning. I found a cheap motel near the beach, the kind with peeling paint and a flickering neon sign. The woman at the desk didn't care who I was or why I was there, just took my money and handed me a key. The room was small, a bed, a chair, a sink with a cracked mirror, but it was mine for now. I dropped my bag, kicked off my shoes, and sat on the edge of the mattress, listening to the faint sound of waves outside. My hands were shaking a little, not from cold, but from the rush of everything I'd done. I'd walked out, bought a ticket, and landed halfway across the country with no plan and no apologies. Part of me wondered what Lauren was doing right then, if she'd told her family, if they were laughing about it, saying they knew I'd crack eventually. I could picture Catherine shaking her head, Miles smirking, Lauren sitting there, maybe confused, maybe mad, but maybe not chasing me. She'd given me that ultimatum, apologize or leave, and I'd picked the door she didn't think I would. Lying back on the bed, staring at the stained ceiling, I let the quiet wash over me. No one knew where I was. No one could reach me. For the first time in years, I wasn't answering to anybody. Not her, not her family, not even the old me who'd begged to fit in. The air smelled of salt and freedom, and though I didn't know what came next, I knew I wasn't going back. I'm Ethan Harper, and those first days in Oregon felt like I'd stepped out of my own life and into someone else's. A better, quieter one. I woke up in that cheap motel room with the cracked mirror and the sound of waves sneaking through the window. For the first time in years, I didn't feel like I had to explain myself to anyone. My phone stayed off, buried deep in my bag, and I didn't want to turn it on. I didn't want to know what was waiting, missed calls, messages, anything Lauren or her family had to say. I just wanted the silence, and Oregon gave it to me. After a quick shower in that tiny bathroom, I grabbed my stuff and checked out, figuring I'd find something more permanent. The woman at the desk didn't even look up when I dropped the key, and I liked that. No questions, no hassle. I drove along the coast in that rented car, the ocean on my left, gray and endless, and trees on my right, tall and green in a way I wasn't used to back east. It was beautiful but not loud, just steady, like it didn't need to prove anything. I ended up in a small town, one main street, a handful of shops that looked like they'd been there forever. There was a sign in a window, studio for rent, $600 a month. I pulled over, called the number, and met a guy named Tom who smelled like fish and handed me the keys after I gave him cash for the first month. The place wasn't fancy, a room with a kitchenette, a bathroom, and a view of the water if you leaned out the window just right, but it was mine. I dropped my bag onto the floor, sat on the lumpy couch, and let out a breath I didn't know I'd been holding. That first day, I walked down to the beach, hands in my pockets, the wind tugging at my jacket. The sand was cold under my shoes, and the waves rolled in slow and steady, like they were telling me to take it easy. I felt lighter than I had in years. All that weight from Lauren's family, their jabs, their rules, their expectations, stayed back in New York. I picked up a few freelance Aitki gigs online, easy stuff I could do anywhere, and grabbed some groceries from a little store where the cashier smiled at me like I was already a regular. It was simple, and simple was what I needed. By day 3, the cracks started showing. I'd kept my phone off, but curiosity, or maybe stupidity, got the better of me, and I turned it on. The screen lit up with notifications like a storm rolling in. Lauren had called 10 times, left voicemails I didn't listen to. Miles texted, "You're a real piece of work," and some rant about how I'd embarrassed the family and ditched my responsibilities. I scrolled through it all, my stomach twisting, but I didn't let it sink too deep. I'd heard it before. They were mad, blaming me, and I wasn't carrying it anymore. There were messages from my sister Mia too, worried ones, and a couple from my buddy Jake, just checking in. I'd get back to them later, but not yet. I deleted the family group chats Lauren had forced me into. Endless threads about her cousins planning brunches and her mom sending passive-aggressive reminders about manners. My phone felt cleaner after that, like I'd scrubbed off a layer of grime. But the calls kept coming. Lauren again, then Miles, then a number I didn't recognize but figured was Catherine using someone else's phone. I didn't answer. I didn't need to hear the panic or the anger, didn't need to know if they were cursing me or crying. I knew the script. I was the bad guy, the quitter, the one who couldn't handle it. Let them think that. I sat at my little work table, opened my laptop, and typed an email to Lauren. It wasn't long, just a few lines. "I'm safe. I'm not coming back. If you need to reach me, talk to my lawyer." I didn't have a lawyer yet, but I'd get one soon. I hit send, closed the laptop, and leaned back in my chair, staring at the ceiling. No apologies, no explanations, no room for her to argue back. It was the last thing I wanted to say to her for a while, maybe ever. The phone might ring again, but I turned it off and tossed it on the couch. Outside, the sky turned pink over the water. I stepped onto my tiny balcony, breathing in the salty air. I could hear seagulls and the low rumble of a boat somewhere far off. This was my life now, my quiet life, no one else's rules. I didn't know how long it'd last, didn't know what they'd do next, but in those first 48 hours, I found something I hadn't had in years. Peace. Not just the absence of noise, but the absence of their voices, their demands, their judgment. It said everything I couldn't put into words. I'd walked away and I wasn't looking back. I'm Ethan Harper, and after a week in Oregon, I started feeling like the dust had finally settled. Not just around me, but inside me too. The seaside studio was home now, with its creaky floors and salty breeze slipping through the window. Every morning, I woke up to the sound of waves, brewed coffee in a chipped mug I'd grabbed from a thrift store, and sat at my table with my laptop, picking up freelance IT jobs to pay the bills. It wasn't glamorous, but it was mine, and that was enough. Back in New York, I could only imagine what they were saying about me. Lauren's family had a way of twisting everything into a story where they were the victims and I was the villain who'd stormed out and left it all in ruins. "He abandoned us," I could hear Catherine saying, her voice dripping with that fake hurt she was so good at. "He's unstable," Miles would add, with that smirk like he'd always known I'd lose it. "He couldn't handle the pressure," Lauren might say, quiet and sad, like she was disappointed but not surprised. I didn't have to guess too hard. I'd lived with their judgment long enough to know how they'd spin it. They'd sit around that big table at the estate, sipping wine and tearing me apart, convincing themselves I'd been the problem all along. But I wasn't there to hear it, and that was the best part. I had my own witnesses, though, people who'd seen it differently. My sister Mia had watched me shrink over the years trying to fit into Lauren's world. She'd call me after every visit to their house asking why do you let them treat you like that? I'd brush it off, tell her it wasn't a big deal, but she knew better. My best friend Jake saw it too. He'd been there from the start, when Lauren and I first got together, and he'd watched me fade into her family's shadow. "You're not yourself around them," he'd say, and I'd laugh it off. But he was right. They'd both tried to warn me in their own ways that I was losing something. Now that I was gone, I could feel it coming back. Lauren hadn't filed for divorce, not right away, and that didn't surprise me. She wasn't the type to move fast. She'd wait, play it out, see if I'd crack first. Catherine probably told her I'd come crawling back, begging forgiveness. "They always do," I could hear her saying, smug and certain, like I was some predictable stray. Miles would back her up, saying I didn't have the guts to stay gone. They'd sit there, plotting how long it'd take, how many days before I showed up at the condo with an apology and a promise to behave. But days turned into weeks, and I didn't call, didn't text, didn't respond. I'd sent that email, "I'm safe. I'm not coming back. Talk to my lawyer." And that was it. My silence drove them nuts, I bet. I could picture Lauren checking her phone, waiting for something that wasn't coming, her mom hovering over her shoulder, telling her to be patient. But I wasn't playing their game anymore. Out here, I was breathing again, really breathing, not just gasping between their jabs and expectations. The air in Oregon was crisp, thick with salt and pine, and it filled my lungs like it was washing away all those years I'd held my breath. I'd walk the beach in the mornings, hands in my pockets, watching the waves roll in, and it was like they were smoothing out the rough edges inside me. I didn't need much, just my little place, my work, and the quiet. I'd erase their voices from my phone, their faces from my head, and every day I stayed gone, I felt stronger, like I was building something new from the pieces they tried to break. I thought about my mom sometimes, how she'd raised me and Mia alone after Dad died, working long shifts at the hospital to keep us fed. She never apologized for who she was, never bent to fit anyone else's idea of her, and I'd forgotten that about myself somewhere along the way. Lauren's family made me feel small, like I had to prove I was worth something. But here I didn't have to prove a damn thing. The guy at the grocery store, the lady who ran the coffee shop down the street, they didn't care where I came from or who I'd married. They just nodded, said hi, and let me be. It was simple, and simple was freedom. I kept my phone off most of the time now, only turning it on to check in with Mia or Jake, who'd both cheered when I told them I'd left. "About time," Mia said, and Jake just laughed, saying, "I knew you had it in you." They were my anchors, the ones who reminded me I wasn't crazy for walking away. Lauren could wait all she wanted, her family could spin their stories, but I wasn't going back. The dust had settled, and I was still standing, stronger, quieter, and finally free. I'm Ethan Harper, and 2 months after I landed in Oregon, I had to go back. Not to stay, not to fix things, just to get what was mine. I'd been living light in that little coastal studio, working my freelance gigs, breathing the salty air, but there were things in the condo I couldn't leave behind forever. Not furniture or fancy stuff, Lauren could keep all that, but the small things that mattered, my mom's old books, a watch my dad gave me before he passed, a couple photos of me and Mia when we were kids. Those were mine, legally and every other way, and I wasn't letting them stay buried in her world. So I booked a cheap flight back to New York, rented a car at the airport, and drove to the condo on a gray Tuesday morning. The whole trip felt like walking into a memory I didn't want to relive. The familiar roads, the hum of the city, the weight of it all creeping back. I didn't tell anyone I was coming. Not Lauren, not her family, not even Mia or Jake. I wanted it quick and quiet, in and out before they could turn it into a fight. The condo looked the same when I pulled up. Sleek building, glass windows, the kind of place her money had picked out, not mine. I still had my key, and it turned in the lock easy enough, the door swinging open to that sterile, expensive smell I'd never liked. The place was empty, or so I thought. Lauren's shoes weren't by the door, her coat wasn't on the rack. I let out a breath and got to work, pulling a couple boxes from the closet and starting in the bedroom. I grabbed the books from my nightstand, the watch from the drawer, and a handful of clothes I didn't mind taking. It felt strange being there without her voice in the background, without her eyes watching me like I was about to mess something up. I was halfway through packing when the door opened behind me. I froze, hands on a photo frame, and turned to see Lauren standing there. No warning, no call, just her in that little coat her mom gave her, the one that cost more than my truck. She looked the same. Dark hair pulled back, face calm, but her eyes were wider than usual, like she hadn't expected me. "Ethan," she said, her voice soft, almost shaky. I nodded, keeping my hands busy with the box. "Just getting my stuff," I said, not looking at her too long. She stepped inside, closing the door, and stood there like she didn't know what to do. "You really meant it," she said, and it wasn't a question. I nodded again. "Yeah." She moved closer, her boots clicking on the hardwood, and I could feel her trying to figure me out, like she always did. "We can fix this," she said, her voice taking on that practiced tone she used when she thought she could talk me into anything. I shook my head, slow and sure, and kept packing. "No, we can't." She went quiet then, and I thought maybe she'd leave, but she didn't. She just stood there watching me fold a shirt, her arms crossed tight like she was holding herself together. "You didn't even try," she said after a minute, and there was a bite to it now, a little of that anger I'd been waiting for. I stopped, looked at her straight on, and said, "I tried for 8 years, Lauren. You didn't." Her mouth opened, then closed, like she wasn't sure how to argue that. I went back to the box, stacking the photos, feeling the air get heavier between us. "You never fought for me," I said, keeping my voice steady, even though it hurt to say it out loud. "You fought to keep me in place, to keep me quiet, to keep them happy, but you never fought for me." She flinched, just a little, and I saw something flicker in her eyes, maybe guilt, maybe realization, but it was gone fast. "That's not fair," she said, but it sounded weak, like she didn't believe it herself. I shrugged, taping up the box. "Maybe not, but it's true." I picked up the second box, started on the living room, some old records, a mug I liked, and she followed me, hovering like she wanted to stop me but didn't know how. "What am I supposed to tell them?" she asked, and I knew she meant her family. I didn't look up. "Whatever you want. I don't care anymore." That hit her. I could tell, because she went quiet again, longer this time. I kept moving, kept packing, and when I was done, I had 2 boxes and my bag ready to go. She was still standing there, coat on, looking smaller than I'd ever seen her. "Ethan," she said, "one last try." But I shook my head again. "I'm done, Lauren. Take care." I walked past her, out the door, down the hall to the elevator. She didn't follow, didn't call after me, and when the doors closed, I felt that weight lift again. I drove straight to the airport, shipped the boxes to Oregon, and caught the next flight out. Back on the coast, I landed under a sky full of stars, the ocean waiting for me like it always did. That last visit didn't change anything, it just closed the door I'd already walked through. She still didn't get it, still thought it was about fixing something broken. But it wasn't. It was about letting go. I'm Ethan Harper, and after I got back to Oregon from that last trip to New York, I started building something real, not just a life, but a version of myself I'd lost somewhere along the way. The boxes from the condo arrived a few days later, and I unpacked them slow, putting my mom's books on a shelf I'd snagged from a yard sale, hanging the photo of me and Mia on the wall. The watch from my dad stayed in its box for now. I wasn't ready to wear it yet, but knowing it was there felt right. That little seaside room started looking like mine, not just a place to crash, and every piece I added made it feel more solid. I'd been freelancing since I got here, fixing people's tech problems online, but I decided to push harder. I started advertising my services around town, dropping flyers at the coffee shop and the hardware store. Word spread fast, and soon I had steady clients, mostly small businesses who liked that I didn't complicate things or charge too much. They didn't care that I didn't come from a big-name family or that I'd married someone they'd never met. They just cared that I showed up and got the job done. It was a kind of respect I hadn't felt in years, and it built me back up. brick by brick, into someone I could stand to look at in the mirror. The town was small, but the people were good, honest in a way Lauren's crowd never was. I met a guy named Ray at the diner one morning, a fisherman with hands like sandpaper who nodded at me over coffee like we'd always known each other. Then there was Lisa, who ran the coffee shop and always slipped me a muffin when I walked in, saying, "You look like you could use it." They didn't ask about my past, didn't need to know my tax bracket or who I'd married, and that was a relief I didn't know I'd craved. I started hanging out with them more, grabbing a beer with Ray after his boat came in, helping Lisa fix her ancient computer when it crashed. They became my people, not because I forced it, but because it happened naturally, easily. I got back in touch with Mia, calling her one night after I'd settled in. She picked up on the first ring, her voice bright and loud. "Ethan, you're alive!" I laughed, told her about the studio, the ocean, the work I was doing. She said she was proud of me and I could hear the truth in it. She'd been waiting for me to break free longer than I had. We talked about how she was doing back home, and I promised I'd visit soon. Hearing her voice in my ear again felt good, like a piece of the old me was slotting back into place. I started hiking on weekends, trails through the woods or along the cliffs, the kind of thing I never had time for back east. The air was clean, the views wide open, and it cleared my head like nothing else could. One Saturday, I stopped by the local shelter on a whim and came home with a scruffy dog, one ear up, one ear down, kind of funny looking. I named him Scout, no real reason, just a name that fit. He'd follow me everywhere, running on walks or curling up at my feet while I worked. He didn't ask for much, just food, a pat, a quick run on the beach, and giving him that made me feel steady, like I was good at something again. It's funny how the simplest things started meaning the most. I'd sit on my balcony at night, Scout snoring beside me, listening to the waves and watching the stars cut through the dark. Work was picking up. I was consulting full-time now, building systems for local shops, troubleshooting networks. People trusted me, relied on me without needing my whole story. I'd traded the condo's polished floors for this creaky little place, the city's noise for the ocean's roar, and it wasn't perfect, but it was mine. I'd spent too long in Lauren's shadow, bending to her family's rules, that I'd forgotten what it felt like to stand up straight. Here, I didn't have to explain, didn't have to apologize for where I came from or what I didn't have. Ray would clap me on the shoulder and say, "Good to have you here, Ethan." Lisa would grin when I fixed her printer, and that was enough. Scout would nudge my hand with his wet nose, and I'd laugh, scratching his ears, thinking how easy it was to make him happy. I'd found peace, not the loud, dramatic kind, but the quiet, slow kind that stuck around. It was in the salty air, the steady rhythm of the days, the way I could hear myself think again. I was building myself back, one piece at a time, and every brick I laid down took me further from the guy who'd begged for a seat at a table that never wanted him. I'm Ethan Harper, and after months of quiet in Oregon, the past started creeping back, not loud or crashing, but soft, like an echo I couldn't shake. I'd built a good rhythm here, walks with Scout, work, coffee with Lisa, beers with Ray, and it felt solid, like the life I'd always wanted but didn't know I could have. The studio was home now, with its thrift store shelves and the sound of waves keeping me company at night. I'd stopped checking my phone for messages from Lauren or her family, figuring I'd left them behind for good. But then one morning I opened my laptop and saw an email from her. It wasn't much, just a few lines, no subject, but it chilled me. I sat there at my little table, coffee going cold in my hand, staring at her name on the screen. Part of me wanted to delete it unread, keep the peace I'd fought so hard for, but the stubborn part, maybe the dumb part, clicked it open. She didn't beg me to come back, didn't try to guilt me like her mom would have. It was simpler than that, sadder. "I see it now, Ethan," she wrote, "how it all played out. I was so busy trying to keep them happy. Mom, Miles, everyone, that I didn't see I was losing you. I'm sorry." That was it. No promises, no pleas, just regret laid out plain and quiet. I read it twice, then leaned back in my chair, letting it sink in. Scout stared up from my feet, whining for a walk, but I just sat there staring at those words. It wasn't anger that hit me. I'd burned that out months ago. It was something else, a tired, aching kind of hurt. "I see it now," she said. But where was that clarity when I was standing in front of her, asking her to choose me? Where was it when I was packing my bag, waiting for her to say something, anything, to stop me? I didn't reply, not because I was mad, not because I wanted to hurt her, but because there was nothing left to say. Silence felt right, more than any words I could send back. It was the answer she'd never heard when I was still there, still trying. I closed the laptop, grabbed Scout's leash, and took him to the beach. The wind and waves drowned out the echo of her email. The sand was cold under my boots, and Scout ran ahead, chasing gulls while I walked slow, hands in my pockets, thinking it over. She'd lost me long before I left, and I'd lost her too, somewhere between her family's rules and my own breaking point. That email didn't change anything. It just confirmed what I already knew. I was done carrying her regret along with me. A few months later, another letter came, this time handwritten, on thick paper that faintly smelled of Catherine's perfume. I knew it was hers before I opened it. Lauren didn't write letters, but her mom loved the drama of it. I stood by my mailbox, the ocean rumbling in the distance, and tore it open. "Ethan," it started, all formal and sharp. "You've broken my daughter's heart. You abandoned your duty to this family and left her to pick up the pieces. I hope you're proud of yourself." The rest was more of the same. Condescension dripping from every line, blaming me like I'd torched their perfect little world. I read it once, standing there in the wind, then went inside and fed it into the shredder by my desk. The machine chewed up the words, and I watched the pieces fall into the trash, feeling nothing but relief. She didn't get it. She never would. She thought I'd broken Lauren, but Lauren broke herself, choosing them over me every chance she got. I wasn't proud of leaving, but I wasn't ashamed either. It's what I had to do to breathe again. I didn't owe her an answer. Didn't owe her anything anymore. The shredder whirred to a stop, and I took Scout for another walk, letting the salty air clear my head. Those echoes, Lauren's email, Catherine's letter, kept coming, but they didn't stick. I'd built too much here for them to pull me back. Work was steady now, clients relied on me, and I liked the weight of it, how it kept me grounded. Ray and I started fishing on weekends, just a little boat and a few quiet hours on the water. Lisa teased me about my sunburn when I stopped by the shop after. Mia called sometimes, telling me about her life back east, and I'd tell her about Scout's latest trick or the view from my balcony. It was small, this world I'd made, but it was solid, and it didn't bend to anyone else's rules. The past could echo all it wanted, Lauren could regret, Catherine could rage, but I wasn't listening anymore. I'd found my footing, one step at a time, and every day I stayed gone, those voices got quieter. I'd sit out on the bluff some nights, watching the waves crash under the stars and feel the truth settle in. I didn't need their forgiveness, didn't need their understanding. I had this. The ocean, the dog, the people who didn't care where I'd come from, and it was enough. I'm Ethan Harper, and it's been a year since I walked out of that big house in New York, a year since I bought that one-way ticket to Oregon and decided to stop explaining myself. The divorce is final now, papers signed, lawyers paid, all the loose ends tied up neat and clean. I live in a modest place on a bluff overlooking the Pacific, a step up from the studio, but still simple, with a porch where I can sit and watch the water stretch out forever. I wake up early most days, make coffee, and take Scout for a walk along the shore before I settle into work. Still in tech, still fixing systems and solving problems, but on my terms now. The air's always got that salty bite to it, and the sound of the waves is a constant, like a heartbeat I've gotten used to. It's not a flashy life, but it's mine, and that's the biggest change of all. I don't answer to anyone anymore. Back when I left, Lauren wanted an apology, wanted me to bend one last time to fit her world. But I chose the ticket instead, and I've never looked back. The condo, her family, that whole suffocating mess. It's a memory now, fading a little more every day I spend out here. I think about it sometimes, how I spent 8 years trying to be what they wanted, twisting myself into knots to prove I was good enough. Her mom, Catherine, with her cold stares and sharper words, Miles with his smirks and jabs, and Lauren, caught between them and me, always picking their side when it mattered. I used to wonder if I could have fought harder, stayed longer. But out here with the ocean in front of me and Scout at my feet, I know I did the right thing. Leaving wasn't running, it was saving myself. The divorce took months to sort out, longer than it should have, because Lauren dragged her feet. She didn't fight it outright, didn't show up with lawyers screaming, but she stalled. Missed deadlines, asked for extensions, like she thought I'd change my mind if she waited me out. I didn't. My lawyer handled most of it, and I kept my distance, sending emails when I had to, keeping it short and to the point. When the final papers came through, I signed them at my kitchen table, the pen scratching loud in the quiet, and felt a weight lift I didn't know was still there. It was done. No more ties, no more claims, just me and the life I'd built out here. I've got a routine now, work in the mornings, hikes or fishing with Ray on weekends, coffee with Lisa when she's not swamped at the shop. Mia came to visit once, stayed a week, and we sat on the porch every night, talking about everything and nothing. She said I looked different, lighter, and I told her I felt that way too. Scout's grown into himself, still scruffy but smarter now, and he's my shadow, following me from room to room, sleeping by the door like he's guarding it. The folks in town know me, not my whole story, just the parts you share, and they don't ask for more. Ray calls me Ethan like it's always been my name, and Lisa started trusting me with the shop's books when her numbers don't add up. It's a community, not forced or fake, just people living their lives alongside mine. I don't explain myself anymore. Not to them, not to anyone. That's the real freedom, the kind I didn't know I'd lost until I got it back. In New York, I was always justifying why I did what I did, why I wasn't like them, why I deserved a seat at their table. Here, no one cares. I show up, I do my work, I crack a beer with Ray or toss a stick for Scout, and that's enough. I don't owe anyone a story, don't have to prove I'm worth something. Lauren's family thought love came with conditions. Obedience, fitting in, apologizing when you stepped out of line. But I've learned it doesn't have to. Mia loves me because I'm her brother, Ray because I'm a friend, Scout because I'm his person. It's simple, and simple's what I've needed all along. I think about Lauren sometimes. Wonder what she's doing now that the papers are signed. Maybe she's still in the condo, going to family dinners, still trying to keep Catherine happy. That email she sent months ago about regret sits unanswered in my inbox, and I've never felt the need to change that. She made her choice back then, picking them over us, and I made mine when I walked out. We're even now, in a way, both free to live how we want, just not together. I don't hate her anymore, don't resent her. It's just done. This is home now, the wide view, the quiet nights, and every day I'm here I feel more like the man I was supposed to be. I work hard, keep it simple, and let the ocean smooth out the rest. No apologies, no looking back, just me, my dog, my people, and the life I built my way.